Right, I will now call to order this May 13th, 2025 Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Land Use Hearing. And would you please call the roll for us?
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner West.
Here.
Commissioner Savas.
Present.
Mr. Chair.
Here.
A quorum is present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. And Clerk, would you please introduce the item under consideration today and announce the order of today's hearing for us?
Thank you, Chair. Before the board today is file number ZDO292, which amends Appendix A of the Comprehensive Plan to include the Walk Bike Clackamas Plan, and which updates the active transportation policies of Comprehensive Plan Chapter 5, the Transportation System Plan. Today's hearing will proceed in three main steps: presentation, testimony, and deliberation. First, the board will receive a presentation from staff about the file. Second, the chair will open a public hearing for testimony. The chair has established the order for testimony as follows. A representative from the Planning Commission will have the first opportunity to provide testimony with 3 minutes to testify. Next, any public officials who wish to testify will have 3 minutes each. Next, representatives from recognized community planning organizations and agencies will have 3 minutes each. Lastly, all other members of the public wishing to testify will have 3 minutes each. In the third and final step of the hearing, the board will deliberate and either render a decision today or set a time to make a decision at a later date. Now, with your permission, Chair, I will turn to Senior Planner Scott Holscher to begin the staff presentation.
Yes, thank you so much, and good morning. Scott Holscher, Senior Planner for Clackamas County in the Engineering Division. Before I get into the presentation and an overview of the project, we have received new written comments on the proposal that have come in. These both came in yesterday, so wanted to make the commissioners aware of these comments, and I have hard copies which I will pass over to you right now. The first is from the City of Wilsonville, and they have recommended one change. The change has to do with a priority level of Stafford Road from a Tier 3 priority to a Tier 2 priority. And this change would make the entire length of Stafford Road a consistent Tier 2 priority in the Walk by Clackamas plan. And staff supports this change. The second letter of written comment is from the Jennings Lodge CPO. And this is a general letter about supporting the Walk by Clackamas plan. They have noted several areas in the Jennings Lodge area that are in need of improvement and improving the overall walkability of the Jennings Lodge area. So those are two new written comments in addition to the 6 exhibits and written comments that were previously submitted as part of the application.
Thank you.
So with that, I will dive into the presentation and do an overview of the Walk by Clackamas plan. Next slide, please. So as was noted, this is an update to the county's bicycle master plan and pedestrian master plan. It is required by state law to plan for these modes. The Transportation Statewide Planning Goal, number 12, contains rules surrounding pedestrian and bicycle planning, and these are in Oregon Administrative Rule 660. Second, ZDO 292 would adopt the Walk by Clackamas plan as a section of the comprehensive plan by adding it to Appendix A of the comprehensive plan. Walk by Clackamas, if approved, would replace the existing 1996 pedestrian bicycle mode plans that are currently in Comprehensive Plan Appendix A. And then thirdly, the amendments involve updates to the active transportation policies that are currently in the Transportation System Plan, and this is Chapter 5 of the Comprehensive Plan. Next slide, please. So Walk by Clackamas was a 2.5-year project that establishes a roadmap for pedestrian bicycle investments in the county, both urban and rural areas. It looks at where do we need new bikeways, trails, sidewalks to create a connected network and make walking and biking a viable form of transportation. Walk by Clackamas identifies the projects, programs, and policies to meet this vision. It's important to note that no monies have been budgeted for any construction of the projects identified in the plan. Funding decisions would be made in the future. Also note that this plan was really built on community engagement. It was a limited budget project, but we spent most resources engaging the community and doing public outreach, and it was really a centerpiece of the project. And also just a reminder that we discussed this in detail. We had a policy session on April 14th and reviewed the details of the proposal. Next slide, please. So one of the main outcomes of the project are updated capital project lists for both pedestrian and bicycle projects. This slide shows the breakdown of the different types of projects by planning area, and there are two types of projects in the plan. First are linear projects that include things like bike lanes, sidewalks, and multi-use trails. And secondly, point projects. These include things like crosswalks, bike crossing signal, point-specific projects. And this slide, as I mentioned, shows the breakdown by planning area. So at the start of the project, we created 5 planning areas, each with a different set of priorities. So there's different needs in, say, the Mount Hood area versus the urban Oak Grove area. So at the start of the project, we created 5 planning areas, and so we, in a sense, have 5 unique plans in the Walk by Clackamas plan. And this slide shows the breakdown of the total projects in the plan and the total mileage for sidewalks, mileage for bikeways, and trails. And as you can see, there's 236 total projects. One side note, there's been one project added, recommended to be added by the Planning Commission. So that number should be 237 as the proposed number of projects in the Walk by Clackamas plan. So we thought this was helpful just to show the breakdown in the number of projects in the different areas. Next slide, please. So the projects are represented on maps for each of those 5 areas. This is a sample map showing a portion of the McLaughlin area. I will note that the plan is for unincorporated counties, so as you'll see on the map, there aren't projects shown within the city limits. There are associated project tables for each of the maps, each of the 5 area maps. The tables provide information on the projects, such as the project extent, a description, so more detail about the project, the distance of each project. A couple other notes about the map. Trail projects are shown on as dashed lines, although on this example, there aren't any projects that are multi-use trails. But in other areas, you'll see if it's a dashed line, that represents a trail project. The letter in front of the project number represents the planning area that it is within. So you'll see on this example, the M represents the McLaughlin area. Projects in the east area on that map will have an E, E101, E102, et cetera. The priority tiers are represented by the different colors. So the green lines represent Tier 1 highest priority projects. Tier 2 medium priority are shown as yellow, and the red are the Tier 3 projects. Next slide, please. So besides building projects such as new trails, sidewalks, crosswalks, there are other things that the county can do to have a safe transportation system. Support a program includes things such as safety and educational campaigns like high school traffic safety classes. This slide shows the current programs that the county conducts from a supportive programming standpoint. Those are shown in blue. And those include things like the high school traffic safety classes, safe routes to school programming, et cetera. So the current programming is shown in blue. The programs that came out of the Walk by Clackamas plan and the public engagement are shown in orange. So the new programs, we asked the community for ideas through our surveying, through community conversations, and input from our project advisory committee. And the 6 new programs are shown, as I said, in orange. similar to the capital project, there aren't monies set aside right now for any of these programs. Funding would have to be obtained in the future to do any of these programs. I won't go through all of these. I'll just note one of the top scoring programs in our surveying was the School Zone Safety Campaign, which you can see under campaigns, the top one under the campaigns category. And this came out of, as I said, the public engagement process and also our data gathering process during Safe Routes to School plans. There's been a lot of data that shows large volumes of traffic during AM and PM drop-off and pickup in school zones. So this campaign would focus on streets adjacent to schools and could involve printed electronic materials, social media posts, yard signs, something similar along those lines. And it would be a collaboration with the school district. Next slide, please. So one of the new facility types that's come out of this project is this concept of shared streets. One of the goals going into this project was to look at creating a connected network of active transportation facilities. And shared streets are a new facility that would connect to sidewalks, traditional bike lanes, and provide access to community destinations. Currently, the county does not have any of these shared streets. But during our public outreach efforts, we heard that speeding is a problem and that lowering speeds is one tool in terms of increasing safety on our road network. So a main feature of these are lowered speeds on local roads. And this doesn't apply to arterial roadways or the rural areas. This is something that we're looking at as an urban treatment and specifically local roads in lowering the speeds to 20 miles an hour on those roads. Other things that could be associated with the lowering of the speeds could be pavement markings and signage, but that'll be determined during the implementation process of the Shared Street program. Right now, we've just identified a draft network of these shared streets that is in the plan, and implementation would occur in the future. Next slide, please. So along with capital projects, the programs that I talked about, another amendment that is part of ZDO 292 are changes to the active transportation policies in Chapter 5 of the Comprehensive Plan, which is the Transportation System Plan, TSP. And this proposal includes amendment of 7 new active transportation policies, 6 amended active transportation policies, and also adding the Walk, Bike, Clackamas goals to Chapter 5, the TSP. And I won't go through all of the policies. I can certainly take any question. There are the red line copy of Chapter 5 in your packet. But I'll just note an example of a new policy, this concept of protected or separated lanes, which really came out of the update to the transportation planning rule and outlines, that's the rule that outlines requirements for pedestrian bicycle planning. And this update that was done recently has to do with this notion of planning for facilities that provide a bit more protection and comfort than just a white line. So along arterial roadways, looking at what we call separated or protected facilities. And so there's a new policy, 5K4, that has to do with that concept. Next slide, please. So when we make changes to the comprehensive plan, this process involves making findings to the relevant criteria and demonstration that the amendments comply with the legal requirements. So staff has reviewed the relevant approval criteria and prepared detailed findings. You'll find those findings in the Planning Commission staff report. And there's findings related to each of the 19 statewide planning goals. Many of those do not apply to this type of project. Planning goals regarding forest or farmland, for example, do not apply to this project. There's additional findings regarding the Metro Regional Transportational Functional Plan in the Oregon Transportation Planning Rule. Both of those detail requirements for planning a connected system of improvements for pedestrian bicycle transportation. And also there's findings regarding the relevant sections of the county's comprehensive plan and the zoning and development ordinance. And staff findings shown that all of those criteria have been met. Next slide, please. So the Planning Commission held a public hearing on this on April 14th, and they are recommending approval. There was discussion. I'd just like to briefly note, summarize 4 items that were discussed with the Planning Commission. First has to do with funding and implementation. The Planning Commission asked about available funding and how specific projects would get funded. Staff explained that no monies have been budgeted at this time for the projects and that funding decisions would be made in the future. It was also discussed that funding for active transportation comes primarily from a variety of grant opportunities and that road fund monies from the state are earmarked for repair and maintenance of the vehicle road system. Secondly, it has to do with the legal basis for this project in this Walk Bike Clackamas plan. And I've touched on that a little bit during this presentation, but we discussed with them the Oregon Administrative Rules, which detail the requirements for pedestrian and bicycle transportation planning. The Transportation Planning Rule is the Oregon Administrative Rule that implements Goal 12 transportation. And so there was discussion on the specific requirements for this type of project, such as performing a gaps and deficiencies analysis, conducting an existing systems review, and listing needed projects, among other requirements. We also discussed project cost estimates. It was noted by the Planning Commission that cost estimates for the projects in the plan would have been helpful to get a sense of the plan's financial implications. But staff explained that the project included an initial cost estimate methodology. However, due to the limited project budget and cost overruns, final cost estimates for the projects were not prepared. But it is expected that the Transportation System Plan update, which will be starting this summer, will provide cost estimates for the high priority projects for all modes of transportation. Fourth, general support for this project and the Walk Bike Plan adoption. Staff would just like to note that there's been overall public support for the Walk Bike Clackamas Plan through this adoption process in the public hearing before the Planning Commission. In particular, the public has expressed the need for a safer, more connected active transportation network. During the Planning Commission public hearing, there was no testimony in opposition to the project. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the Planning Commission public hearing on April 14th, it was a unanimous approval for the amendments with one change. They are recommending inclusion of a project in rhododendron. The specific nature of the project would be to add a new enhanced crosswalk on Highway 26 in rhododendron. And the Walk Bike Plan has been updated to include this project, and that's project number E113 on figure 35 in the draft plan. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, staff recommends approval of the ZDO 292 amendments as drafted and attached, including the additional project recommended by the Planning Commission. The adoption elements, again, are threefold. First, to adopt the Walk Bike Clackamas Plan by reference in Appendix A of the Comprehensive Plan. Second, adopt Walk Bike Plan appendices in Appendix B of the Comprehensive Plan. And update the active transportation policies in Chapter 5 of the Comprehensive Plan. And it's been a pleasure to present that to you today. And with that, I will take any questions that you might have.
Right. Commissioner Savas has a question to start.
Yeah, I appreciate the presentation. Great job. I appreciate all the work of all the public and staff who worked on this and provided public comment. No, I don't have any challenge with the Planning Commission's recommendation, but I do have a question if it comes to moving projects from one tier to another. And I know that, and I'm going to ask you for a brief explanation of the rationale why one is a tier 1, 2, or 3. My concern, for example, with some of these needs as the urban areas within cities grow on the edges, that puts a tremendous amount of burden on our road funds for some of these projects. And we are, for example, on Stafford Road, we've got 2 roundabouts that are costing us millions and millions of dollars. And those are millions and millions of dollars that, had those needs not be there, they would be going towards other areas that have higher needs. So to move that one tier 3 project, and I would love to see that. I mean, extremely dangerous on Stafford Road. It's not bike pen friendly. But I'm just looking at aspects where, closing gaps within transit areas where there's a high likelihood of utilization for commute purposes, people going back and forth to work is, low-hanging fruit. And whereas maybe something that, like Stafford Road, maybe, certainly I'm sure people will trek that long distance on bike, but most won't. But that becomes more recreational. And I understand from my experience level that is something that, and even including Miley Road and other areas that I saw in the comment. So can you explain why, briefly, for those listening, why a project's in tier 3 and not in tier 2 as typical?
Yes, so the way we did the prioritization for the different projects, every single project was scored based on criteria and a methodology. So it was a quantitative analysis that looked at, for example, if a certain project is within half mile of X number of destinations, it would get a certain number of points. Fewer destinations, then it would get fewer points. If a project was in a equity focus area, as determined by our equity analysis for the project, if it was in, high priority equity area, for example, it would get X number of points. If it wasn't, then it would get. So we did that sort of quantitative scoring and analysis. And I did, for this specific project, go through the scoring and the analysis. And the northern section versus the southern section, which has the different tiering, the scores were almost identical with one noted difference. And the difference, the reason why they were different priorities is the northern section, there's more destinations that would be served by an improved project. So there's Lusher Farms, there's a church, there's schools on that northern section that aren't on the southern section. So that was the difference in terms of why the northern section of Stafford Road was a higher priority tier. That was the difference in the scoring. And, this is an example of the scoring sheet. So I did go through the analysis and see why that difference occurred. And it was based on the number of destinations that would be served by the northern section.
Yeah. I'm also aware that on the southern section that it would probably require rights of way and a lot of drainage work and a lot of money. So I don't know where the money would come from. We're having a hearing on this, right? So we have to is that correct? We got to open it up for a hearing today?
Yes, public.
Okay. So I will withhold my comments till afterwards. But thanks, Scott.
All right, Commissioner West, do you have any questions or comments? All right, well, if there's no more questions or comments from the commissioners, we'll move on to the public testimony portion. I will now open the meeting for public testimony. Clerk, would you please moderate any in-person and virtual testimony for us?
Thank you, Chair. First, is there a representative, either in person or virtual, from the Planning Commission who wishes to testify? Seeing none in person or online, Chair, I will next move to ask if there are any public officials who wish to testify. Seeing none, Chair, I'll next move on to ask if there are any representatives from any community planning organizations or agencies that wish to testify. Seeing none, Chair, I will finally call for any other members of the public who wish to comment, either in person or virtually. If you are in person, please come forward to the dais, introduce yourself, and you will have 3 minutes.
Good morning, Chair Roberts and the Board of County Commissioners. My name is Will Farley. I'm from 3910 Southeast View Acres Road in the Oak Grove neighborhood. As a frequent walker and recreational cyclist, I am overly supportive of the county's walk-bike plan. County staff have been great with the public input and their outreach, and have developed a comprehensive plan on what projects will improve the livability of many of the county's residents. This plan just goes to show how the county is seeing a much bigger need for the infrastructure supporting active transportation. I wanted to point out that of 14 projects identified in the 1996 pedestrian master plan, only 3 have been funded or constructed, and 11 projects still remain as a high priority on the new list. This amounts to 1 priority project each decade, and is not fast enough considering that we now have 91 projects identified as Tier 1 in this plan. Funding is understandably a bottleneck. When asked on how we will fund these projects, the response usually points towards grants. Having observed the grant process firsthand in this region, I feel we will continue to complete 1 project a decade because we are falling behind our colleagues when competing for the limited funds passed down from federal and state means. It feels like we are waiting for that winning lottery ticket to fund these livable streets. The county has an issue I wanted to bring to the attention of the board. When it comes to the funding of projects, many jurisdictions task developers with building out the system they have an impact on. I've recently discovered that the county apparently does not have this same ability, and I feel it is holding us back from having these projects completed, many more of these projects. For a bit of the background, I advocated for 450 feet of sidewalk to close a gap in the system near a project contributing similar traffic to what would be coming from a 200-lot subdivision. Almost any other jurisdiction would have the authority to require the improvements in the right-of-way, even if the improvements were not on their frontage, as long as it fell within the constitutional limits identified by the Nolan and Dolan cases at the Supreme Court. However, when I appealed the land use in an attempt to get this sidewalk conditioned to the development, it was found by staff and the hearings officer that the county does not have such a mechanism in its zoning and development ordinance to be able to condition off-site improvements to the active transportation system. It only works for vehicle capacity improvements. So I'm asking the board today to make note of this missing piece in the way we are able to fund improvements to our transportation system. The county will be undergoing revisions to the transportation system plan and the zoning and development ordinance in the near future, and it is important that staff are able to condition development with some of these needed improvements. I fear that without this ability soon, the county will leave money on the table and we will continue to fall even further behind our neighboring counties. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other general member of the public in person who wishes to comment today? Seeing none, Chair, I have several online, so I'll now move to those members of the public who are attending virtually. Please raise your hand and I will call on you in the order that I see. First, I see Nicole Perry. Nicole Perry, I'll unmute you. Please introduce yourself and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Hello, Board of Commissioners. My name is Nicole Perry. I am a resident of Clackamas County in the city of Milwaukee. I served on the Walk Bike Advisory Committee and am the Clackamas County Safe Routes to School Coordinator. But just to clarify, I am speaking today as a resident of this community. The adoption and implementation of the Walk Bike Clackamas Plan and its incorporation into the comprehensive plan will be valuable to Clackamas County. It will be an important tool as the transportation system plan is updated. The projects and programs within the Walk Bike Clackamas plan are based on safety, connectivity, and sustainability. They will promote better health, address gaps and deficiencies, and update active transportation policies. This is important as the time goes on and things in this world change. If a route is made safer for a kid to get to their school on foot or wheels, it could also serve as an accessible way for an older adult to get exercise or be social, or for a new parent to push a stroller outside of their home. When routes are made safer for some, all can benefit. Greater connectivity in both urban and rural areas of the county will improve livability, the economy, and the environment. Traffic is the movement of vehicles and people through an area or along a route. Making plans for all road users is a smart, safe thing to do. That is why I recommend the adoption of the amendments in ZDO 292, including the Walk Bike Clackamas plan. It will be an important supplement to the TSP process and an important piece of planning for the future of Clackamas County. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I see Jeffrey Grover. Jeffrey Grover, I'll unmute you. Please introduce yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Hi, it's Grover Jeffrey Bornefeld, and good morning, Chair Roberts, Commissioner West, and Commissioner Savas. I'm a longtime resident of Clackamas County, unincorporated, and I serve on many committees, and I really want to give kudos to the committee that this is from, because I attended many of their meetings, and that they did a very, very thorough job, and appreciate the work that they did to get us to this point. I am, as the other person said, speaking as a resident, not as any member of any particular group. And I want to speak to, first of all, the kudos for the shared streets concept. It is active in other jurisdictions in our area, and I do appreciate that, and I think it will make a great difference. Because one of the things we're trying to figure out is how do we get less people on the roads and more people using alternative forms? And if it's not safe, or it's not convenient, or if it's not accessible, it doesn't work. So I'm very much in favor of this. The other thing I want to comment on briefly is that this is an amendment to the comprehensive plan. And I so appreciate when we actually look at the comprehensive plan. It's required. It is the goals and policies that direct the future of decisions, and I feel that that isn't always seen that way. ZDO seemed to win out, and I know that we went through a really disastrous opportunity of losing the Evangelical Retreat Center because the comprehensive plan stated it should be saved, not in specific, but in theory and in acquiring new open space, et cetera, et cetera. However, the ZDO that was put in place to protect the contours and trees and nature and whatnot had a statement that says, where feasible. And the only feasible part was it wasn't as profitable to use that method. And they actually then clear cut 72 trees and ruined a whole neighborhood resource. So I just really want to be an advocate for using the comprehensive plan as it is stated. It is what directs future decisions. So those are my comments, and I want to thank you all for what you're doing, and thanks for the work of this committee, and I advocate for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. This is a final call for anyone who wishes to testify in this matter who has not yet spoken today, either in person or virtually. I see nobody else, Mr. Chair, either in person or virtually, who wishes to speak.
All right. Thank you. I'll now close the public testimony, and we'll now proceed to our deliberations. So I will turn to my colleagues about any questions or comments. Commissioner Savas is.
Yeah, appreciate all the public comment, and Mr. Farley, appreciate your testimony. we're almost neighbors. I just live just off of Risley Avenue, so I know exactly how many people are walking and trying to walk and bike. And as you know, our area is predominantly no sidewalks for most of where you live and most of where I live. You know, my question to Scott on this, for everyone's edification here, on the map that shows the project colors, if you will, McLaughlin green and Jennings Lodge, or Jennings Avenue green and others red. Can you, Scott, for everyone's edification, identify what those three colors are?
Sure. Yeah, the different colors on the maps represent the different priority tiers. So we have three buckets of projects, high, medium, and low priority. So the highest priority based on the quantitative scoring, based on the analysis, and the public outreach that we did. We did a lot of surveying and presenting the draft plan, which with the projects to the community. And so it was based on the quantitative scoring and the public input for the three categories. Green being the highest priority based on that analysis. Yellow, kind of orangish color, being medium priority, and then the lowest priority. Doesn't mean they're not important, you know, if they're red. Doesn't mean they're not good projects, but it's just based on the analysis. And, you know, again, there's not funding tied to these projects at this time. So it doesn't, if it's a red project, it doesn't mean we couldn't go out for grant funding and try to make improvements on, you know, an identified project that's shown on red in the draft plan. It was just a guide to kind of set some framework for, you know, prioritizing, because there's so many projects and the county's so big. But the funding and the further refinement, you know, done during the TSP project.
Yep. Thank you, Scott. If I had my way, I'd make them all green, right? And again, I want to appreciate Mr. Farley coming forward. I know what he does for a living, so he understands this system, understands how in this regional system, maybe that it's heavily competitive, and we don't get sometimes I think our fair share in the region for some of the dollars that would fund some of these projects. So this is a greater issue. We're not going to be able to solve that today, but I just want to say that I share that concern. Again, just one question. You know, I know that most of McLaughlin has got sidewalks, and that's an improvement for the 30, 40 years that I've been living in the area. Why is that still green? I mean, what particular thing makes this all green? I mean, is it going to be wider sidewalks? Because areas that have none are red in this area, or they are like River Road, which is the orange-yellow, which has no sidewalks. So it doesn't make sense to me unless you can better understand, or I can better understand why McLaughlin is still green, which 95% of it's sidewalk today, on both sides.
Well, I think that's a very good point. You know, I don't have the, on those projects, you know, I haven't gone back and looked at this specific scoring. I know there was, I was involved with a project with ODOT on McLaughlin, which you might be familiar with. We did a full corridor analysis looking at safety improvements, identifying needed enhancements for filling in those sidewalk gaps. There's a lot of deficient sidewalks on McLaughlin. There's a lot of ADA improvement needed at the intersections. Recently, there have been 2 enhanced crosswalks with the flasher, RFBs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons, installed on McLaughlin. Even though there have been improvements made, I think there's still a lot of safety improvements that came out of that effort with ODOT. River Road is definitely something that we've, you know, been in our plans since 1996. You know, but, you know, that, I don't have the, you know, I could certainly look into like the specific scoring on both of those.
Yeah. So does approving this today, I mean, I imagine that if there's a need to make any adjustments in the future, I'm not suggesting that this be made, for example, but again, I think the areas that have nothing are always, I don't care what it is, whether it's transit, I don't care where you are, but the areas that have nothing, I think deserve something. The areas that have a lot, I think maybe should, step aside for a moment and let those other areas have something that applies to a number of things. So I'm always kind of stick up for the little guy, or the areas that are less served. And I do know that this whole area is economically challenged, so I know when you speak to the equity index and so forth, so I know some of these areas are, impoverished quite a bit. So that's also a challenge. But I do like what's there. I'm inclined to support the staff recommendation and also the Planning Commission recommendation as is. But I just want to note that funding's the challenge, and we don't have the means to do that. So we will continue to advocate as I can make a plea to my colleagues, both here today and in the future, for how we get a better piece of the regional pie and some of those dollars. I will continue to beg, even parks, for example, and Chair West, not Chair West, but Chair Roberts knows this pretty well because he used to live off of Jennings and what's that street?
Blanton.
Blanton, yeah, Jennings and Blanton. So love to see something there as well. And there's a huge, great project that's being done right now on Jennings Avenue between Oatfield and McLaughlin Boulevard. So that'll be a welcome improvement as well. So I appreciate all the work that has been done. So Chair, find my notes. I'd make a motion if we're all ready.
Commissioner West has a
Okay.
comment first.
Mr. Farley, you came up and gave your testimony, and I looked over at Commissioner Savas and whispered, that was a really quality observation and testimony you gave, so thank you for taking the time. I'm sure you work and have other things going on, but I found your testimony to be quite compelling, and thank you for that information. And I find much of it resonates with where I'm at also, so thank you for taking the time, sir. I gotta say, often right now, our holiday events in our family is as spicy and exciting those things are, like Thanksgiving and Christmas. My cousin Leslie and her husband live just right off of Concord and Oatfield Road, and I promise you they are the strongest advocates for sidewalks on that part of the county. And so, cousin Leslie, we hear you. But it's true that it's quite a busy corridor there, and it's not safe, and there's a lot of residential area, and I don't even know how you would have your child take a normal walk through the neighborhood if they have to traverse Oatfield Road. I have no idea how to navigate that as a parent or how anxiety-inducing that would be. It definitely has some safety issues and is way overdue for important improvements. I know a lot of thought went into this. I'll be supporting this today. I think Commissioner Savas brings up a good point. McLaughlin may not be perfect, but it has significantly more improvements than the rest of the plan. Like Oatfield does not have the improvements. It needs Concord in that part of unincorporated Clackamas County. So I know we have to kind of weigh this out, and we do things as funding becomes available, and then we jump on these things. I think we should figure out ways to make sure it's connected well, Mr. Farley, as that you spoke to, that we don't have weird gaps because it didn't quite fit within certain funding requirements, when we should just make them connect because that makes good sense and it's good local government, which impacts people's lives directly. And so I think that's what that gets to. So I'll be supporting this. Just a couple thoughts that I had. And I hope that we can continue to quickly build out that infrastructure. It's a little disheartening that we just heard, yeah, that's been an issue since 1996. I was a junior in high school. So it's been a minute for some of these projects, but we'll keep advocating for them. So thank you.
Yes, I just have a couple comments. And when I first saw this on the agenda some time ago, I actually asked to meet with Dan about this. And I was really actually excited to see it. As a cyclist, I've done Cycle Oregon a number of times, and I thought, wow, this is fantastic. And to hear that you spent 2.5 years working on this plan, the community engagement, definitely is an absolutely essential part of it. That was a big priority of this as I looked into this. The school safety campaign and the safe routes to school are critically important. And I also want to commend you on rhododendron. And a lot of our rural areas are oftentimes the communities that are neglected. I can tell you that is an extremely dangerous road. I'm thrilled to hear that you added that. It is difficult to get across that Highway 26 and have seen many tragedies out there. So I just am thrilled. I got to spend a lot of time with Dan talking about this, the walk-bike plan, and adding it to the comprehensive plan. So my comments and accolades to you and your staff for doing this. And I'd also like to, as a follow-up to Dan in the back of the room, really like to follow up on some of the concerns brought forward by citizen testimony today. I'd like to learn more about that. And our goal is obviously, if we can move things faster, that's what we want to do, and be out there rallying for dollars to support these important projects. So with that being said, I want to turn to Jane for a moment. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Chair. As Scott mentioned at the beginning of his testimony, of the presentation, we did receive some testimony from the city of Wilsonville after your packet was prepared. They recommend raising project N303 from priority 3 to priority 2. That is adding paved shoulders from I-205 to Beckman Road and Advance Road on Stafford Road. Staff supports that change. If you would like to approve ZDO 292 as is, then I would recommend the recommended motion in your script. If you want to adopt the city of Wilsonville's proposed change, alternative number 1 would be the way to go about that. And that would be changing project N303 from priority 3 to priority 2.
Right. So if I look to my colleagues, and Paul, I know you started to make a motion. Would you like to make a motion?
Yeah. Well, I appreciate staff presentation, and Scott, thank you for answering my question with regard to the Tier 3 criteria to Tier 2. And so I'm inclined, again, for all the reasons you stated, and, you know, you didn't go into great detail, but I understand what those are. I'm inclined to move that we approve file number ZDO 292 as recommended by staff and the Planning Commission.
Is there?
I'll second for discussion.
Yes. And Commissioner West has moved, Commissioner Savas has moved to approve the motion, seconded by Commissioner West, but further discussion, and I think that go ahead with the discussion is.
Yeah, that would be exclusionary from Wilsonville's recommendation, your motion, correct? So we have 3 of us, and we have to come to a common agreement. I would like to include Wilsonville's recommendation.
I understand that.
There are 3 of us.
I kind of stated, maybe we got to come back, but I kind of stated that I think it's, getting back to equity and knowing that how much money we put in the Stafford Road currently. Not only the 2 roundabouts, but the bridges, on Stafford and the bridges on, the bridge on Borland Road. We have put major money in those areas, and that is not a impoverished area.
We are all, and please help me understand this, and if I'm wrong with my geography and streets, from what I heard, and I understand this is last minute change, we are already working on a roundabout in that same area that is a significant investment right now. And these would be kind of speaking to those connectors that we need to prioritize with that investment, with that very dangerous intersection. Yes, Wilsonville also has the highest population of density in apartment and renters out of anywhere else in the entire metro area and state. So over 50% of the people that live in the city of Wilsonville, they rent and they live in apartments. They're not living like in Villebois or other neighborhoods with big single-family homes in the suburbs. They are working families, and that intersection in that area is dangerous. And it has been moved to a priority. I've been advocating for it since I've been a commissioner, and even as a Wilsonville City Councilor. To me, these things are connected. I want to move forward with continuing to prioritize that. Here's my bias. I live in that community. I've been fighting for it since I was a city councilor. I hope that we can get there today with 3 of us to support Wilsonville's suggestions.
Sort of my comment, really to kind of follow up with Commissioner West, I do agree with Commissioner West on this issue. If we can't get there, I guess the next step is to table it and come back when we have the other Commissioner Schrader here. Yeah, or the full board. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
So I get, maybe I have I mean, I don't want to put Scott on the spot. But, you know, when we move things from, you know, a tier to a higher tier, essentially, we're not really taking something from an existing, let's just say if we're moving something, I'll start over. We're moving something from a tier 3 to a tier 2. We're not taking anything from tier 2 and moving it backwards, obviously, right? But we are also, I think, prioritizing, essentially, through the tiering process, we're prioritizing something over the criteria in which all these things were evaluated, right? Every one of these projects, and there's a lot of them on the list. So it seems for us to modify or to, I won't say circumvent, but basically look past that and put special emphasis on an area that is, in this case, not impoverished, I think is, and knowing that poverty and equity is a big issue, and I mean equity from a financial standpoint here, and an access standpoint, and a safety standpoint, that's where I struggle. I just struggle because it seems like we're giving favoritism, if you will, in areas that are, I mean, there's one on there that's close to where Mr. Farley and I live, that's, you know, it's back on the list, right? And there's no adjustment made there, and yet it's a huge safety issue. So I guess I'm trying to be less about my neighborhood and more about where the needs are the highest, and so that's where I kind of stand today. So I am foregoing some of the issues in my neighborhood that I would like to see make changes for. But if we want to bring it back, I'll bring a list too, if we want to bring it back in the future.
I mean, I know we're at large, so we care about the whole county. And I know we all from different geographic areas, but if we walked right there to where this intersection is, I promise you will see like shards of tail lights. You'll see like skids. You'll see a really broken, weird intersection that like significant accidents that happen into, and it makes sense because we're already making, I believe, in that same area, huge investments in prioritizing the safety roundabout on Stafford there. We may not get there, but I don't even disagree with you, Commissioner Savas. I'm going to advocate for that. I've been advocating it for consistently. I haven't changed. This makes sense for me to make sure it's also a priority. It connects well with what we've already prioritized, and so if we've already prioritized something and this almost does that in a co-way, we should continue to do that. Maybe I don't know what the urgency on this is. We may not have 3 votes, it sounds like, but yeah.
Could you address that, Scott, for us?
Oh, my apologies. The mic was turned off. Yeah, on the scoring, so just to reiterate how those scores fell between the north area and the south area, between project N205 and N303, you know, it was just the one that looked at connection to those destinations that was the only difference. So the other criteria, and we can look at those, I can pull the analysis that shows the breakdown on which criteria are assigned for the different goals. So the way we set it up, just a little background on how all the scoring plays out. We, under each goal of the project, so there's safety goal, there's health, connectivity, et cetera. Under each of those goals, there's a number of quantitative criteria that get points. And like I said, we scored every single project. And for these 2 segments on Stafford Road, you know, they scored very close. The numerical difference was only 2 points. And that difference had to do with the destinations, more connectivity on the northern part. Yeah, I do see that, Dan, and
As an option, just for consideration, I hear there's some questions that have been queued up regarding this particular request from Wilsonville. A couple things that I could offer. An excellent job on the presentation. It's excellent information to share about these great, important projects for Clackamas County. This is looking at the plan. As you heard earlier, all those projects are basically taken into and then considered subsequently as a part of the TSP, the Transportation System Plan. And within that Transportation System Plan, there is also a tiering of those projects, okay? In fact, I believe the project we're referring to, I'm gonna look back at Mike so he shakes his head that project is currently in our TSP as a Tier 2 that you're referring to right now, okay? And so you have a couple of options, one of which is in the interest of time and getting this through an efficient, effective government, we could either, one, approve the plan as proposed by the Planning Commission, but call out the request to revisit the priority of this particular project when we bring the TSP forward for consideration, okay? Or option two is to flip that around, approve the proposed plan as proposed with the revisions proposed by Wilsonville, but again, reconsider that project specifically when coming forward and when we come forward and share the TSP with you and you adopt the tiered processes associated with the Transportation System Plan. That is a more holistic look at our system, and it takes into consideration this great work and other great work that's going to be going forward. So I share that with you because you're going to have another bite at this discussion and at this apple. I mean, this is not the last time you'll be discussing this. And so some alternatives for you. I'm not sure, Karen, would you like to add anything?
Actually, no, sorry. Forgive me. They got to finish this session. The other option is you continue this hearing, and basically you're going to punt until there's another commissioner present, or you have time to think about it, and you don't have to make the decision today. That's your third option. Thank you.
Chair, I can amend my motion if that helps.
Yeah.
Okay.
Try it.
Chair, I move to amend the motion to read, I move we approve file number ZDO 292 as recommended by staff and the Planning Commission and revisit the tiering in the TSP in the future.
Of that specific request for Wilsonville.
Of that specific request. Meet y'all halfway.
I just think it's silly that we're not including Wilsonville when we're already improving that entire area. It's like they're co-projects that make sense to do together. It doesn't make sense to me. And we can parse this out. Am I wrong? Am I correct? Am I missing something, Dan, where we are already doing a roundabout in that exact same area? This is more connecting of infrastructure. Washington County's jumped into this. Wilsonville's put money on the table for this. I think there's some congressional input here for that intersection, a lot of work to bring this to that Tier 2 on your TSP plan. Doesn't this all coordinate together if we just include it in this? Am I wrong?
I love when you ask me questions like that. Never is a commissioner wrong.
That's not true, but thank you.
There's just different ways to approach the topic. I mean, one of which, and you heard the discussion from staff earlier, there was an analysis of sections of that roadway, like north versus south.
Yeah.
And there were different factors when you look at north versus south. Yes, we are investing in a significant improvement at Childs Road and Stafford Road and 65th and Ellington and roundabout projects that are down there. Staff provided to you a discussion around the fact that when you revisit it and you look at it more holistically, that maybe it makes sense to consider that as a Tier 2 project. And again, it is a Tier 2 project right now on our TSP. I'm just trying to land the plane between, on this topic, between two highly decorated members of our Board of County Commissioners that have concerns about this particular project. Or we can delay and go to a date certain.
I would just, I think in the interest of time and the further discussion is just tabling this for now. We'll have another commissioner, and unfortunately, we'll just bring it back for further discussion.
Yeah, well, Chair, I think that's the right thing to do. I just want to make it clear, this is not, my issue is not about this area or that area, or not Wilsonville, or it's really about the process and trying to give credibility to all the volunteers that follow the criteria that establish this. So to veer from process is something that, there's going to be winners and losers, and I think the more affluent areas prevail quite frequently, and the less than affluent areas don't do so well. And that's the part that gets to my inner core of who I am.
I just feel like when you are remodeling the house and you take off, you get behind the sheetrock and you say, oh, well, gosh, we got to fix this plumbing too, or to make this all work, we have to address this issue too. This is congruent with what already has been a major investment and a commitment to the area. And I'll push back a little bit, Commissioner Savas. Wilsonville has a significant population. The majority of its population is not affluent in that area, and that is a major safety issue. So yes, Wilsonville, Westland area as a whole, but there's a lot of people in that right there that use that corridor every day that are not affluent.
All right. My apologies for
Sorry.
staff having to come back. So, Gary?
All right, so this would be alternative number 2 in your motions, in your script, page 10 of a motion, and I'm going to propose Tuesday, June 3rd at 11 a.m. as when you would continue this hearing. So if you agree, that would be alternative to motion, if one of you would please
What
make
is
that.
it, June what?
Tuesday, June 3rd, 11 a.m.
So you're going to be missing a commissioner.
There'll be 2 other commissioners present at that point.
Okay.
Commissioner Schrader and the appointment you're going to make next Monday.
Chair, I move that we continue this matter until June 3rd, 2025 at the 10 a.m.
11 a.m., please.
At 11 a.m. for deliberation and decision only.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Commissioner West has moved to continue this matter until June 3rd, 2025 at 11 for deliberation and discussion only. And any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, would you please call the poll?
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Mr. Chair.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And I'm looking at Gary for a short recess.
I want to take a short recess, but the question is, would you like to continue issues in the transit discussion now or continue that after your policy session this afternoon?
Let's do after the policy session.
Because I have a hard 2 o'clock, right?
So we lose quorum at 2 o'clock.
Yeah, I have a hard appointment.
So you need to do it now then. If that's okay, or we bump it to next week.
If it's brief, then if it goes on, then we'll just postpone it.
Okay.
Unfortunately, the timing right now, I think, is incredibly important right now.
Can we take like a 2-minute break, and then we'll come back and finish the issues list, just the transit discussion. We'll bump the economic development outreach to next week.
All right.
Thank you.
We'll take a short recess.